I have spent 200 years cataloging species across the galaxy. I have visited 46 worlds. I have watched civilizations take their first steps out of caves, light their first fires, and shape their first tools from stone. I have written detailed reports on each of them, filed my classifications, and moved on without a second thought. Not once, in all that time, has a species surprised me. Until Earth. My name is Vreth Kai Solani, and I am a senior cultural analyst aboard the hegemony survey vessel Quiet Dominion. My job is simple. We find developing worlds, observe them from orbit, classify their level of advancement, and send home a report. The galactic hegemony has done this for 12,000 years. We consider ourselves the shepherds of the galaxy, the elder civilization, the ones who watch over younger species until they are ready to join the greater community. We are patient, we are thorough, and, if I am being honest, we are proud, perhaps too proud. The assignment came through on an ordinary morning, a G-type star in a quiet spiral arm, third planet. Long-range scans had been taken roughly 300 of the planet's local years ago, and they showed exactly what you would expect from a young world: scattered settlements, agriculture, combustion-era chemistry, no electromagnetic signatures of any significance. My preliminary classification before we even arrived was Tier 1 on the Keth-Varro Development Index. Pre-industrial, unremarkable, a 2-day job at most. My junior analyst, Meave, joked during the briefing that maybe this species would be the one to surprise us. The whole crew laughed. I remember that laughter very well now. I remember how easy it was. We made the jump and dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of their solar system. That is where everything changed. The communications array overloaded within seconds, not from one signal, from billions, radio waves, microwave transmissions, tightly compressed digital data streams, laser-guided communication pulses bouncing between orbital platforms. The entire electromagnetic spectrum around that little blue planet was alive with noise. It was deafening, in a way I had never experienced. My first instinct was to check the equipment. I ran 3 full diagnostics. The equipment was functioning perfectly. All of those signals were coming from the third planet, and not just from its surface. There were objects in orbit, stations, satellites, thousands of them. There were signals bouncing off the surface of their moon. There were machines on the 4th planet, a cold, red desert world, sending data back home. 300 years ago, they had been riding animals and burning wood for warmth. I sat in my chair and stared at the data for a very long time. Then I pulled up the hegemony's historical records and searched for any species that had ever advanced from pre-industrial to spacefaring in 300 years. The search returned 0 results. The fastest on record was the Droon Collective, and their journey from first combustion to first orbit took them 4,000 years. What this species had done was not simply fast. It was, according to everything we understood about civilizational development, impossible. I quietly changed my preliminary classification from Tier 1 to Tier 4. Then, as more data poured in, to Tier 5. My hands trembled when I entered that number, because Tier 5 is our level, the hegemony's level, the level of a civilization that has mastered its own star system and begun reaching beyond it. I had just assigned that classification to a species we had expected to find planting seeds in dirt. We cloaked the ship and moved into a stealth orbit. Standard procedure. When a species exceeds prediction models, I told the crew we would observe passively and collect data before making any decisions. What I did not tell them was that I had no idea what we were dealing with, and for the first time in my career, that uncertainty frightened me. Over the next 72 hours, we watched, we listened, we recorded everything, and with every passing hour, the picture grew stranger and more remarkable. They did not have one government, they had nearly 200. This alone defied every model in our archives. In the hegemony's experience, a species either unifies under a single authority early in its development, or it tears itself apart and goes extinct. There is no third option. Except, apparently, there is. These humans, as they called themselves, had taken their division and turned it into an engine of progress. Their nations competed with each other, and that competition drove innovation at a pace that a unified species could never match. They did not cooperate despite their differences. They advanced because of them. They had built a planetary information network that connected nearly every individual on the surface. Their children, barely old enough to walk, could access the collective knowledge of their entire species through small devices they carried in their hands. I asked Meve to estimate how long it would take a hegemony species to build something equivalent, if starting from scratch. She ran the numbers twice, then looked at me and said she would rather not answer. Then we found the part that none of us could process calmly. They had discovered nuclear energy. That by itself is not unusual. Many species reach that threshold. What is unusual is what they did with it. They built devices capable of leveling entire cities, and they built enough of them to render their own planet uninhabitable several times over. Every species in hegemony records that reached this point either chose never to create such things or used them and destroyed themselves. Humans did something no one else had ever done. They built the devices, tested them over 2,000 times on their own world, aimed them at each other for decades, and then, through nothing but collective restraint and negotiation, chose not to use them. They stared into the possibility of their own extinction and simply decided against it. Not because they lacked the ability, because they chose not to. I do not know how to express what that means to someone who has studied civilizations for 200 years. It is not just impressive, it is terrifying in a way that raw power could never be. Power is common, restraint is rare. We turned our attention to their biology, and what we found there was no less remarkable. Humans are pursuit predators. They do not rely on speed to catch their prey. They follow it. They walk, they jog, they track, for hours, sometimes days, until the target collapses from exhaustion. Their bodies are designed for endurance beyond anything in our biological databases. They regulate their temperature through liquid secretion from their skin. They function in burning heat and freezing cold. They survive in deserts, in frozen wastelands, underwater, and in the emptiness of space itself. They had already sent members of their species to walk on their own moon, protected by nothing but a thin suit, and their capacity for recovery was astonishing. Their bones, when broken, mend themselves, and sometimes grow back stronger than before. Their skin regenerates. They had developed an entire field of knowledge, dedicated to cutting open their own bodies, repairing or replacing what was damaged inside, and closing themselves back up again. And they did this routinely, millions of times a year, and called it medicine. Any one of these facts alone would have made them notable. Together, they painted a picture of a species that simply refused to stop. But the thing that unsettled me the most was not their technology or their biology. It was their culture. They created art, constantly, relentlessly, not just in times of peace and prosperity, as most species do, but during their darkest moments. They wrote poetry in captivity. They painted on the walls of crumbling buildings. They composed music while their cities burned. They told stories to their children in the middle of disasters, not to distract them, but to teach them that the disaster was not the end of the story. They seemed incapable of experiencing anything, joy or sorrow, triumph or loss, without transforming it into something they could share with each other. And they played. They invented thousands of games, physical and mental, individual and collective. They organized entire industries around watching each other compete. Their children practiced cooperation and strategy through structured play from the moment they could stand. It looked like entertainment. I began to suspect it was training. On the 5th day, something happened that I am still not entirely able to discuss without my pulse quickening. A human space agency detected an anomaly in our orbit, a gravitational disturbance consistent with a cloaked mass. They did not announce it publicly. Instead, within 6 hours, 3 separate military organizations, on 3 different continents, independently redirected their tracking equipment toward our exact position. They could not see us. Our cloaking technology is the finest in the hegemony, but they calculated where we had to be based on the effect our mass had on nearby objects, and they pointed every sensor they had directly at us. Then the messages came, not broad signals scattered into space. Narrow, focused transmissions aimed precisely at our ship. They sent mathematical sequences first, then tables of chemical elements, then a message repeated in 38 different languages, all saying the same thing. We know you are there. We mean you no harm. But we need you to know that we see you. I ordered the ship to reposition. The signals followed. I ordered a full engine burn to a higher orbit. Within 2 hours, New transmissions arrived from a different continent, with updated calculations matching our new trajectory. They were not just tracking us, they were telling us they were tracking us. And the most frightening part was their tone. There was no panic in those messages, no aggression, no desperation. They were calm, measured, curious. They had detected an unknown object in their sky, something beyond any technology they possessed, and their response was to say hello. That composure shook me more deeply than any display of force ever could. I pulled the ship back to the outer system and gathered my team. We had to file our classification, and we had to decide what to recommend. By strict technical measurement, Earth was a Tier 4 civilization, perhaps early Tier 5. Their ships were crude. They had not discovered faster-than-light travel. Their reach extended only to the edges of their own solar system. By the numbers alone, they were not yet our equals. But I have been doing this work for 2 centuries, and I have learned that the number on the scale matters less than the direction of the curve. So I pulled up a development graph and plotted humanity's technological progress over the past 300 years against every other species in our records. Every hegemony species follows a logarithmic curve, rapid early growth, followed by a long, slow plateau. It is so consistent that we base our entire prediction system on it. Humanity's curve was not logarithmic. It was exponential, and it was getting steeper. At their current rate, they would reach full Tier 5 parity with the hegemony within 50 years, Tier 6 within 200, Tier 7, the theoretical ceiling that no living species has ever approached, within 500. And those projections assumed they would slow down. Nothing in their history suggested they would. I wrote my report. I stared at it for a long time before I submitted it. In the classification field, I did not enter a number. Instead, I created a new designation, one that had never existed in 12,000 years of hegemony records. I called it Tier Null, and I defined it as follows. Development curve outside all known models. I recommended that the hegemony observe this species from a distance. I recommended that we do not make contact. I recommended that we do not interfere with their progress in any way. And I added one final note, underlined, which I knew would be the most controversial thing I had ever written. Do not, under any circumstances, give them a reason to unite against an external threat. Their history shows what they accomplish when they compete with each other. I do not wish to discover what they are capable of when they cooperate. Before we left, I went to the observation deck alone. Earth hung below me, blue and green, and wrapped in white clouds. On the night side, I could see the glow of their cities, millions of tiny lights scattered across continents, each one representing lives being lived, people eating meals together, children being tucked into bed, musicians playing songs that nobody would hear beyond the walls of a small room, lovers whispering in the dark. Ordinary moments, sacred moments. I pressed my hand against the glass and watched that world turn, and I recorded one final log entry. Not an official one, just something for myself. In 12,000 years, we have never found a species that discovered the power to destroy itself and then simply chose to keep living. We have never found a predator that teaches itself gentleness. We have never found a world that falls down as many times as this one has and never stops getting up. They are not primitives. They are not monsters. They are something we do not have a word for. A species that fights against its own worst instincts every single day and, slowly, imperfectly, beautifully, keeps winning. The galaxy does not need to fear what humanity will do to us. The galaxy should stand in wonder at what humanity has already done to itself and survived. The quiet dominion jumped to faster-than-light speed, and Earth vanished behind us. Somewhere far away, a council of beings older than most stars would read my report and argue about what it meant. They would debate and delay and form committees, because that is what old civilizations do. They move slowly. Humanity does not. And that, more than anything else, is what keeps me awake at night. Not the fear that they will come for us, but the quiet, certain knowledge that one day they will arrive, on their own terms, at their own pace, having earned every single step. And when that day comes, the galaxy will never be the same.